afternoon meeting. Dan, Sean, and I will run you through the day with peace, love, and understanding. And bonus, everybody's going to talk about their favorite Val Kilmer story. Uh, Dan, how did you spend election night last night?
On the couch watching returns and watching the Knicks beat up on the Sixers, just going back and forth.
And were you surprised at what was the thing that surprised you the most about the last night's results?
I think just the Democrats won by the margin they did in Wisconsin, and then waking up and seeing the graphic that they increased their vote share in every single county in Wisconsin. That's
Increased it over the presidential.
over 2024.
Yeah.
So
All right, Sean, what surprised you the most about last night?
I think it's a tie between the margin of victory in Wisconsin and the dichotomy of the vote for the justice and the demand for voter ID.
We're going to talk about all that. Again, as always, if you're here on the two-way platform, we'd love you to be involved. So if you want to get in a question or comment, please raise your electronic hand. I see some hands up already. Once again, we're in the midst of a week with lots of people who've never talked before raising their hand. That goes for whether you're a Trump supporter or not. So please raise your hand if you want to be in on the conversation. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, don't raise your hand and don't put smack in the chat. Enough said
Wait,
about
Mark,
that.
before you get going,
Yeah.
What was your biggest takeaway from the White House press briefing yesterday?
My biggest takeaway from the White House press briefing, that you can't really appreciate the level of tension going on within the dynamics between the White House and the White House press corps without being in the room. Like it doesn't come across on TV as clearly as it does there. I know some of the reporters. I don't know many of them, but there's a lot going on there as these reporters are trying to do their jobs and deal with the reality that there's a lot of changes that are occurring that some of them like and some of them don't like. And it's really interesting to see the varied views of the changes that are taking place. And on some of the issues we've discussed here, where it's not really clear what the right answer is. You don't want necessarily the White House Correspondents Association to be making some decisions, but having the government make some of these decisions also make some people uncomfortable.
Well, congratulations again to you and to Two Way.
All right. For those who don't know, I was in the new media seat yesterday. I got to ask a couple questions for myself, but also for a member of our community, Katie Reeves from Wisconsin, for the first time. And so that was great for Two Way. And Dan, I appreciate you saying that. The president today, this morning, meeting privately with Senate Budget Committee Republicans and Senator Thune. That's his only private event that we know about. At 4 o'clock, the big event of the day, his first Rose Garden event, the Rose Garden not yet paved over, so it's still grassy. He's going to do this big announcement. Not entirely clear what the format will be, whether he'll take questions or not, and whether it'll start at 4 p.m. Eastern time, but that's the plan. And my indications from being there yesterday and from talking to people this morning is there may be more discussions taking place today, that the announcement may not be as final as the president said a couple days ago. That's what he's doing today. The vice president, no public events on his schedule. I'd be surprised if you weren't at the Rose Garden event. Tomorrow, he's doing an interview with Fox and Friends, so stay tuned for that. Capitol Hill, lots going on, no votes, but Ways and Means Republicans are meeting starting at 9 o'clock for an extended meeting about the very important question of taxes and reconciliation. Hakeem Jeffries, 10:45 a.m., has his weekly press conference. The Senate Republicans are having lunch today with Scott Bessent of the Treasury. He may well tell them some things about what's going to be in the tariff announcement, which is still a big mystery to most, because I think it's a mystery to the president still. So some stuff may come out of that. And then at 1 o'clock, Chuck Schumer is having a press conference on the topic of tariffs. All right, so we'll get back to tariffs in a second, but let's talk about last night, as they say. Here's how I want to frame it. I hope you're both game. Sean first. Rather than any spin, because we can read that anywhere. If in the private meetings Republicans are having today at the NRCC, at the RNC, White House Political Shop, what are they saying about the Florida results and about Wisconsin? Like, what's their realistic appraisal about what's bad about it, what's not so bad about it?
I mean, look, the good side is, so the NRCC is going to care about the NRCC, which is the two Florida races. They won them both. They didn't put any money into them. I think they won in a comfortable way, meaning for all the hype, Florida 6, which is the one that everyone was watching for. you know, is the one that they ended up winning both by 15. Is that down? Yeah, but I've said this all along, and I would have said it either way. But special elections are special. When you look at the people who turned out, I think Charlie Kirk commented last night, mostly with respect to Wisconsin, but I think it's true across the board, is that we're not good at turning out our folks in non-general elections. And there's I don't know I think if I were still at the NRCC, the question I would be asking is this mechanical or motivation? Is it that we're not getting them and turning them out, or are they just not motivated to turn out? And if so, why? But there's two different issues there, right? It's one is your ground game suck and you're not getting the people out because you're not touching them and you're not effectively doing it like you would in a general, or are you doing it, but they're just pissed off or they're not motivated and they're not turning out. But those are two separate questions.
Okay, Dan, before you weigh in, the same question. What are Republican Democrats privately going to say about that? Let's show some things. 106, please. Here are the results of that Supreme Court race. Was not close. Republicans lost it by 10 points. Now, I will say, I hadn't really focused on the two candidates. I'd heard characterizations of them. She's a much better candidate than he is. The Democrat was a much better candidate, and that played a role, but obviously not everything. Dan, flag for these 105A. These are what you referenced, the county by county. A little bit hard to see here, but as you said, Dan, in every county, the direction moved towards the Democrats, and there's no mistaking that. So, Dan, again, what would Democrats be saying privately, not hyping it like this is, this shows doom for Trump? What's the realistic appraisal?
So I think three things. One, at the DCCC and the DSCC, candidate recruitment is going to go into overdrive now. They will be going to candidates who are on the fence, who maybe thought, I don't know if I want to run with the Democratic Party kind of a mess and a circular firing squad. And they will say, look, our party is energized. To Sean's point, the other side is still struggling to win when Trump isn't on the ballot. This is a good time to run. Even though we lost by 15 in both those Florida seats, Trump won them by 33. So if you're in an R+8, R+10 or 12 district, you just do the simple math. This may be the best shot that you're going to have in the next 5 or 6 years to run. So one, candidate recruitment. Two, Musk is a liability. We've talked on this show about the focus on Musk, and Mark, you've kind of been a little skeptical about it. He's unpopular. And Doge there are a lot of parts of Doge that are unpopular. And so I think we don't have a proactive message right now. And this will be the third thing. We've got to get one, just like Rahm and Schumer in 2006 had 6 for 06, the 6 things we would do if we got the majority back. They're going to have to come up with a positive agenda ultimately here. But the focus on Musk is kind of working. And the question for the Trump White House is, how much capital do you want to keep spending defending Elon Musk? Think about the number of press conferences, Fox interviews, cabinet meetings that is all about defending Musk. And every time they're defending Musk, you're not attacking Democrats and you're not on offense.
So two quick things on the Wisconsin thing that I think are interesting. If you look at 2024, both parties, Wisconsin was won by 9/10 of a point. Both candidates got roughly 1.6 million votes. In this race, the Dems got 1.28. So they fell off, which is not unnormal. It's a special election. It's off season, right? But that's still not bad. You're about down 300 and plus. The Republicans who had gotten 1.6 with Donald Trump leading the ticket went down to 1.05. That's a huge problem. That's the turnout, the motivation problem. And again, what is driving that? Are they pissed off? Are they pissed off at Donald Trump? Are they pissed off at what's going on in Wisconsin? Or are they not motivated? Did they only turn out because of Donald Trump? Did they only want to see him? And I think understanding that delta is critical to the midterms, because you need to understand, are you facing a motivation or a mechanical problem? And nowhere better than Wisconsin did that show up.
Yeah. Let me say, I heard from 2 very smart Republicans who made the same point separately. And it rhymes with what you were just saying, Sean, which is we talk a lot about the post-Trump Republican Party. What's it going to be like? How's it going to work? It may be that no one can get the MAGA base out sufficiently to match Trump's ability to win 2 of his 3 races. And there's some mechanical things that go along with the energy and the emotion. I'm still on the fence about Musk. I still don't think he's as big a factor as some people do. But we've said this before. he's extremely visible both as a government figure and as a figure on the campaign trail and as a boogeyman, spending all this money. So, Sean, I'm just curious, at this point, if the president said to you, should I sideline Musk as a political figure? Let him keep doing Doge, but sideline him. Would you say yes or no?
See, this is again where I love. I'll use the media's favorite phrase: without evidence. Everybody jumps to conclusions. If you want to know that, go out and poll it. Find out what people's views are, because and also the issue is, like, Musk comes with a lot of money, right? He's dumped millions and millions of dollars in there mechanically to the state party and other groups. So is it, I get his $15 million, but he shows up at 2 rallies? Because if you tell me that you sideline Musk, but you don't get his money, I'll have him have this rally. I'd rather have the 15 to 20 million. I just am not convinced. I get Dan. I don't necessarily disagree with Dan's point. They may not be the most popular guy in the world, but I don't know that that's a motivating factor.
Yeah.
Well, but the problem is in every single poll, he's upside down. I mean, I am not even.
But Dan, go back to the numbers. The problem with the Republicans, the Dems, both parties attrited from 2024, which is, again, it's a general election. You guys did a better job of getting your folks motivated and out there. Republicans didn't. Do you blame that on Elon Musk? I don't.
Well, no, but yeah, sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. You go ahead and finish your point.
I mean, just there is a lot of data, qualitative and quantitative, that he is not popular, and he can't stop inserting himself by his choice. And some of what he says is crazy. Yeah. It's going to be an ads and an albatross.
I would say this for sure. And again, I'm still not clear on having a problem net whether he's good for the parties involved. I will say this: he's horrible at messaging. Right, his messaging is not consistent. If he would listen to a skilled person like Sean and be on message and say the things that are popular, he could be popular. But he says so many things that are unpopular and crazy. Money. I've been on this thing. I don't understand why it doesn't get more attention. There's an asymmetrical advantage for Democrats in raising small dollar contributions. The example I give all the time, Jamie Harrison, who went on to be the chair of the DNC, ran against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina in a Senate race. He had no chance to win, and he raised over $100 million in mostly in small dollar donations. Sean, what is your party doing? Because we saw that in Florida. Yes, the Democrats didn't win, but a big part of why they were thought to be somewhat competitive and why the margins were closer is the Democrats raised a ton more money, mostly through small dollar contributions. Why can't MAGA raise small dollar contributions the way the Democrats can?
I think they can, but it's two things. One is, again, it's focused on Donald Trump. When Trump goes out and asks for $10 or $20, he gets it. I don't think we've been able to translate that to the greater cause, because a lot of these people don't believe that they're there to support Donald Trump. Number two, just real quickly, in the business of fundraising, one of the reasons that small dollar costs more. So if you raise $5, you have to spend the envelope or the mail. I mean, mail, that all costs more. The ROI on a small dollar return is a lot higher than it is on a large dollar donor, where you're calling up, somebody says, yeah, I'll send you $10,000, $5,000. That costs you a phone call and 10 minutes of your time. Small dollar. So the other thing to keep in mind is, just remember, all dollars aren't created equal. When you look at a campaign, and this is what always annoyed the hell out of me, is you can raise $1 million, but if you spend $950,000 raising that million, your net is 50 grand. If you raise $1 million of high dollar money, you're probably spent, $10,000 raising it, and now you have $900 to $900,000 to spend. I think that the overall sometimes headline number gets lost in the reality of what the net is.
Tesla sales down 13% in the first quarter, just announced. Dan, what accounts for your party at a time when people say there's no energy, et cetera, and people are despondent? What accounts for the sustained asymmetrical advantage of raising small dollars?
So look, we've had this since Howard Dean rose in 2004, and in that crowded field raised, I think it was 15 million, which at the time was huge compared to John Edwards and Dick Gephardt and everyone else, because he was fueled by low dollar. Low dollar money, primarily raised online, is fueled by emotion and intensity. You have to keep stoking the fire. It is not just a consistent thing. If you look at when Joe Biden really fumbled that debate, not only did major donor money drop off, but I was hearing almost every single day from Delaware, the low dollar, which is like the canary in the coal mine, like ceased because the emotions and the intensity just dissipated. Trump struggled raising low dollar in this most recent campaign up until the indictments. And then it turbocharged everything because, again, it's emotion and intensity. We've been very good at investing in the infrastructure of this, of kind of continuously communicating, but we've had our periods where it struggled. And I think while the party is a mess, if you think about 2028 and a proactive message and all the different factions, we are not a mess in terms of our base disliking Donald Trump and Elon Musk and what is happening. And that is why we're going to get to Cory Booker doing kind of that, stunt, and people are opening their wallets to write to candidates. And that is, again, if you're recruiting a candidate, major donor may be a little bit of a problem because Skadden and Arps might not write as many checks anymore. But as long as you can press send and you can turn around money, you will be competitive. You will be able to do what you need to do. And I can't underestimate telling a recruit of that ability to say, you know what, I'm going to make the jump.
So two quick follow-ons. One, I know it's not getting the attention, but also just I know Elon stole the headlines, but both Soros,
JB Pritzker
and Hoffman, we're all seriously involved in, $3 billionaires giving money. But the other thing is, Dan touched on this mechanically, and I know this is always my go-to, but the Act Blue mechanics on the left still favor their ability to raise money, their lists, their activity. We're not there yet. And I think that's, and we've tried to get there. It's just we're not competitive. And there's a lot of complaints about how our side is trying to do this, both philosophically and mechanically, but they still have a hidden advantage in the mechanical ability to reach out to folks. The way Act Blue works is actually really well, keeps that left base churning.
Sean, this has been going on for 20 years now.
Yeah, I know.
Now you got all these Silicon Valley folks on your side. Somebody should fix it.
Right. No, this is actually the right time to do it, is to get a bunch of these guys together. But again, part of it is philosophically, our party wants to control everything and stovepipe it. And there's some concerns about how that's been handled, and in terms of how we have tried to solve that problem on our side. And I agree with you. We now should take advantage of the Silicon Valley tech world's sudden conversion.
Sustained disparity, asymmetrical advantage for Democrats is just so striking to me. Yep. All right, tariffs. I can't tell you how much of my day yesterday, like the last couple of weeks, is spent dealing with business leaders and members of Congress of both parties who say they've never seen anything like it. I've never seen so much elite opinion saying the president is committing political and economic and policy suicide with these tariffs, begging for change, hoping for the best, but extremely worried. So a couple things to show. First, these are two elements that illustrate what elites are thinking. Almost every elite I know. 103, please. This is a Seth Golden tweet. And again, they may be wrong, but this is what Seth Golden says. Liberation Day will define how stupid we are. Number one, extremely stupid would lead to recession. Number two, above average stupid, stagflation. Number three, moderately stupid, negotiable but pain. Four, not stupid, negotiable hairline healing fractures. In other words, people think this is either really dumb or an epic historical failure. Here's a cartoon 104. Again, this summarizes almost all elite opinion, including some members of Congress who are supportive of President Trump's position publicly, but privately are really worried. Now, everybody's going to be focused on what happens at 4 o'clock, without a doubt. But I continue to hear that the bazaar is open and that even today, and certainly after today's announcement, the president will be open to negotiating. Here is Caroline Leavitt yesterday in the press briefing, basically saying, yes, the bazaar is open. Change can occur even after the announcement. As I said, here's Caroline Leavitt yesterday.
Or countries, if they change their policies either before tomorrow or after tomorrow,
can have the president alter what he's planning for that country or that sector. Is that a possibility? And if so, what factors the president consider in making those changes?
Well, the ultimate change for these companies in these countries, Mark, will happen when they decide to do business in the United States of America. And as I just laid out, they will face no tariffs at all if these companies choose to invest here in the United States and to move their production and their manufacturing here to the United States as well. As for tomorrow, the president will be addressing the decades of unfair trade practices that have ripped our country off and American workers off. It has hollowed out our middle class. It has destroyed our heartland, and the president is focused on reshifting our global economy to ensure that America is once again the manufacturing superpower of the world.
So if they do something today or later in the week that's a pledge for future activity, would that be good enough potentially to alter the policy?
Again, the president has been looking at the very unfair trade practices of the past. Certainly, the president is always up to take a phone call, always up for a good negotiation, but he is very much focused on fixing the wrongs of the past and ensuring that American workers have a fair shake.
So if someone calls after tomorrow and says, hey, I'm ready to make a change, he'd be open to that?
The president is always open to taking calls.
Okay. A question from one of our community members.
Okay,
Katie,
good. We won't play Katie. Dan, if you were an advisor to Canada, say, or Belgium, and they said, we don't like what he announced on the Rose Garden Wednesday night, what would you tell them to do?
I would tell him to put retaliatory tariffs on, because I think Trump's going to blink. And I've been saying this for months, the entire time now. I think he wants you to come to him immediately, grovel. He'll cut a deal and he'll say he won. Show strength, show action, move on. And I think the fact that they're now teasing, and I predicted this yesterday, I knew it. They're going to say, well, we're making progress. We're going to give it a week. Like, he's going to try to get out of this, because the number one thing is, the question is just, it's the 2 Ds, degree and duration of financial pain for Americans. That's the bet. That's everything. They're all admitting there's going to be pain. How long and how much are we willing to stomach? And if I were one of these countries, I'd say, don't blink. He'll blink first.
Sean, is that the advice you'd give Canada or one of these other
Well,
countries?
so Canada's in a separate category because
you're
of
right.
the
Yeah.
NCA.
Let's do Belgium.
Yeah. So if you're Belgium, so there's something that we're forgetting in this discussion, which I think is critical. And this is why I was actually perplexed by her answer on this, because the way that the president has laid this out and the way that I have understood from the folks at some fairly high levels that this is being enacted is Belgium has a 10% tariff on autos. We're going to raise our auto to 10. You take yours to 0. We take ours to 0. I support that. I mean, that's, to me, like, the idea that we are getting screwed by other countries is something that has been happening for way too long. Israel yesterday announced that they would take their tariffs down to match ours. That, to me, is great. We've seen early signs from both Malaysia and Vietnam. The EU has said that they'll take their 10% auto tariff down. I think that where I think there needs to be clarity is to say, and again, I mentioned this the other day, the problem is going to come in this area of non-tariff barriers. The VAT, for example, in EU is going to be a problem because it's hard to quantify. How do you say, here's what our VAT is worth? And how do we equate that to 50 different states having sales tax? Not every state has a sales tax. But I would say to the country at hand, figure out how to make it clear, because if the United States is basically saying you have a tariff on our goods coming into your country by X tariff, India 100% in some areas, more than that in others, then all you're saying is we're going to match whatever that tariff rate is. And if you take yours down, we take ours down. And that's where I think that the administration needs to focus a lot more, is to say, all we're doing is creating a level playing field, full stop. Once they get into beyond that, I think they're going to lose a lot of people who don't understand, because it's a very simple message. You charge us X, we'll charge you X. You take yours down to Y, we take ours down to Y. And I'm not sure that that's getting across.
But Sean, if you were saying to Belgium, okay, you have a 10% tariff on cheese, we put on 10%. All right, let's take them both off. How do you negotiate the non-tariff stuff?
Well, I think, again, part of what I've been told is when you go through there's a 301 section, a 232, all these little trade things. And what's the administration claiming they did? If it's easy, then do it, right? In other words, if it's just a tariff rate, then you have to question whether or not what the U.S. does is going to harm you how adversely that's going to harm you. Some countries may say, great, we don't really care.
Right.
But I think if you're going to then take your tariff rate down, where I think the rub is going to come in is if you go to Belgium and say, your tariff rate's at 10 on cheese, we're going to raise ours to 10 on cheese. Belgium says we'll take ours to 0, you take yours to 0, and then the US comes back and says, yeah, but we got these other problems.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yep.
Because now Belgium's going to say, wait a second, we went to 0, you went to 0, and now you want more. That's and the devil today is going to be in the detail. If it's simply tariff rates, then this is going to be a really easy negotiation, or potentially. If you get into the sort of the ambiguous stuff, I think that's where, to Dan's point, they're going to say, well, then we're going to retaliate because you can't come after us for our tax system or whatever unless you can quantify it in a much better way.
Dan,
and I want to be clear because I see it in the chat. I hope, and I wrote this on Substack the other day, I hope Trump is successful. I'm not rooting against America. I just think there is a degree of risk that is real that the White House and Trump are admitting to. That is not me making up the fact that there will be some economic pain.
Well, can I just
and maybe a lot.
Exactly.
There's two issues here that we're kind of both talking about. And I think that they're both important. The economic impact that we're talking about, how is this going to affect the American consumer, our trade, and our industries? How is it going to affect their ability to do this? The second, and that we've been alluding to it a little, is the political impact. Yep. And I think that this is, to me, I mean, they're, depending on who you are, I think they're equally important, because if this goes really well, this is a huge thing for Trump to say, see, I told you so, I know better.
Absolutely.
And I'm right. Or if enough countries, which is what I think that they're going to try today at 4:00. My guess is that between 5 hours ago and 4:00, Lutnick, Bassett, Jameson Greer are all going to come and say, here's what we got. We got these 5 countries, 10 countries that are already, and Trump's going to want to roll those out and say, we're already getting success.
Yes.
We're already doing that. And by the way, we've got a conversation with the EU tomorrow. They're going to take their tariff rate down. If that happens, that's a huge, huge political win for Donald Trump. And if it doesn't, and these countries today, if they go with the Dan route and start putting reciprocal tariffs on, and it looks like we're just going to escalate this thing, I think both politically in terms of Trump and the Republicans, but also we've talked about the internal stuff. There's going to be some serious finger pointing tomorrow, or probably more likely this weekend, over who's to blame for it.
I 100% agree with that. The only thing I'd add is there's much more restiveness amongst Republicans in Congress than is publicly displayed. They will not tolerate a trade war. They're hoping for the cave because
they're the ones that, remember, they're on the front line. So if you're Caterpillar, you're calling up your senators and saying, hey, I got to move this D14 tractor to Colombia, and it's got a $300,000 tariff. Like, no way, I can't sell. We're going to get killed by the Koreans who are bringing in theirs.
Well, and this 100%. Is where Democrats have to be careful, because if we look like we're rooting against America and we look like we're hoping for pain, that is not a good spot to be in. So it's a balancing act between we hope for he's successful, we're fighting for American jobs and workers, and also like this may be insanity.
Curious to see how Schumer handles that at 1:00 today when he has a press conference on this topic with other Democratic senators. All right, one more topic, then we're going to get to your questions. 2028, cultural difference between the two parties, not hard and fast, but in general, Democratic presidential candidates who run and flame out don't run again, don't succeed in running again. Republicans have a history of nominating people, not always, Trump and Bush, 43 were exceptions, who have run before. Cory Booker ran, didn't do particularly well on any front, raised less money than people thought he would, had no political traction whatsoever. He gave his big filibuster speech yesterday, rallied a lot of Democrats. They liked it. Dan, is Cory Booker considered a major candidate for 28? And if not, why not?
I don't necessarily know if he is. There's some stuff in his personal life. He's not necessarily been a great, a lot of stuff professionally to point to in the Senate. But what he did do yesterday, to your point, was the base is saying do something. And he did something. It was a stunt. Other people have done this. It's completely meaningless, like on some level. But he showed like, I'm in the fight. I'm doing something for you, as opposed to like Rahm Emanuel, who's going to Centerview Partners, going back to Wall Street. And so, Booker he's young-ish. He's a person of color in a party that's a big deal in primaries. So he's not insignificant, but he has not shown an ability to break through and to crystallize and clarify a message really at all on a national level.
Sean, if Booker ran, would he be your party consider him formidable?
You know, I'm going to stay consistent with what I've said all along. I think if he can find, he doesn't have the mechanics behind him yet. If he can put a good team, I think, look, I'll admit, I think that where the Democratic Party is right now, they're looking for someone to be their champion, someone to go out there and show fight. And I think yesterday was a stunt. It was, I mean, whatever. But you know what? Somebody needs to motivate them. Someone needs to do it. And he's in you know, when you're on an island and you can be the only person doing it, he was at least somebody. And that's sort of what I was hearing last night and reading some of the stuff where people were like, at least he's trying. Now that doesn't say much for where the party is, but the bottom line is that he's at least doing something. You got Gavin doing a podcast where he's reaching out to folks on the right that can't endear him too much. And I think that, you know, I think that he has some potential if he can get the right people around him, raise some money, put a team that says I can run in more than 5 states. He's got something. I think. I don't know that we would take him that serious. I think we'd have to see. This is like, you know, watching him take a few swings and saying, "Do you want to draft him?" I think he's got to play a few games first to see if he's more than one speech. But I will say, as a side note, to Dan's mentioned this, I read that Rahm Emanuel like I'm going home to my investment bank as I've decided that this presidency thing ain't working.
And I'll say too, Cory Booker has churned through some incredibly talented staff. Some of the best in the party.
Correct.
Short times there.
Correct. He doesn't seem to. He doesn't. And his first run, maybe his only run for the White House, it was not a well-oiled machine at all. And on the finance side, on the messaging side, etc. All right, Rahm, you both mentioned it. So Ari Emanuel is reported to be a billionaire, and while Rahm is not a billionaire, he's got plenty of money.
Yep.
So I think if I asked you, either of you, if Rahm came to you and said, "I'm thinking of running in 28, is it okay if I go to an investment bank?" I think you'd both say no. Dan, do you agree with Sean that this means he's not running?
Yeah, I mean, maybe he just thinks the party's going to have to be more pro-business, and nothing will say, you know, it's more pro-business. Like, I was an investment banker working on deals for a few years. If he is thinking of running, this reminds me of Hillary Clinton, you know, leaving the State Department and going to give $250,000 speeches to, you know, hedge funds and private equity. It stuck with her. She kept having to answer for it.
If he has a portfolio there that involves like nonprofit stuff or whatever, maybe. But his biggest problem, if he wants to run for president, is the base. And the base, this just gives him another talking point to say this guy's not part of
it. But well, also, Rahm's a smart political guy.
Yeah.
I mean, and I respect that, but he knows enough to know that this would be a liability. Like,
because it's not just what he's working on, it's the firm's clients. It's where they're making money. It's the deals that they're buying into, that they're advising on, that he would have to answer for. And, you know, they don't always help the church.
Yeah,
a lot of different people.
All right, time for your questions again. If you'd unmute yourself, say where you are, tell us what's on your mind. Grateful to you all for participating and part of the community. Hannah, welcome in. Unmute, please, and tell people where you are and what's on your mind. Thank you for being part of this.
Of course. I normally watch you guys on YouTube because I work, so I can't normally tune in now, but I am today. Dan, if I was a Democrat ever, I would want to be like you. Sean, I listen to your podcast all the time. I couldn't vote in 2016 due to my age, but I voted 2020 and then this last election for Trump. I live in Chicago. I live right downtown. And one thing I've noticed is, hold on, my dog's like going to be annoying. Our mayor has like a 6% approval rating. So I'm in like Cook County. Brandon Johnson is.
Oh, that's what happens in Chicago.
All right, you got to unmute again, Hannah. Hold on.
You just cut out for a second.
Okay, so I live in Chicago, but most of my family lives back in Michigan, and here it's very like no one is a fan of Brandon Johnson. I think I can say that he has like a 6% approval rating. People have called for his recall. And I just wonder why Like, I feel like if this was New York, this would have a ton of like national coverage and people would be talking about it. And Chicago's a pretty big city, and I just feel like there's not a lot of
Yeah.
coverage. Do I think it's necessarily going to flip red? No. I was like, oh, maybe, it will be a little bit more red this past election. And I think it was a little bit. But I don't think it's ever going to be like red. However, I was wondering like what everyone's thoughts on why this wouldn't be getting the coverage that I think it would be if it was a New York City mayor.
Yeah. Hannah, you know that New Yorker cartoon, famous New Yorker cartoon about the perspective from Manhattan. It's
Yes.
the bias against covering any place but New York and DC is just massive. And
Yes.
California.
but California too. I mean, there's stories that happen in Chicago, like on the public transit or in the street.
Yeah.
I mean, and while the coverage of the gang violence gets some national attention, if that were New York, it would get a lot more. It's not a bias against Chicago. It's a bias against anything that's not New York. But I will also say, and then turn it over to Sean and Dan, the Republican Party and the conservative movement has failed to figure out how to do a multi-pronged effort to say to voters, the left has failed you for generations. Give something else a try. And until they have a
Right.
concerted, multidisciplinary effort, the Democrats are just going to keep electing either extreme liberals or liberals to run their cities. Sean.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, it's just there's a media. I mean, part of this also just comes down to where the media is, right? It's in LA, New York, and so you don't get the same. I mean, the Chicago Tribune isn't going to write a story that's going to get the pickup. So you have a decline in that. You just there are some. I mean, obviously, there's some good business outlets there. News Nations is based there, but it doesn't have the same resonance that New York does. For a million reasons that there's a media bias in terms of what they cover and what they don't cover. But I think part of it also is change. To Mark's point, people don't go, okay, well, like New York at least has had a Republican technically, in the last decade. And I think there's a sense that, or maybe more. And so there's a sense that, it's a little bit more of a political story there. Even that is a stretch. But anyway, I think there's a media bias, not in the normal sense of what they cover and what they don't.
Dan.
Yeah, it's something that worries me as a Democrat, that there's kind of the prime example of our intellectual rot is in blue cities like New York, Chicago, New York City, Chicago, some other places. I do think it's one of the reasons I'm very suspect of J.B. Pritzker's ability to get the nomination is that I do think should he run, he will have to answer for this. And the fact that so many businesses have left Chicago, left Illinois, the problems with crime that, we talked about this with Rahm. Full disclosure, my brother-in-law is a major political consultant in Chicago, and his wife works for J.B. Pritzker. But I think it's a problem. It's a problem for the party, big time.
Hannah, why do you and all your friends watch two-way?
Well, it's really my mom. It's really my mom back in Michigan who was like, you should watch this. It's the only thing that keeps me like somewhat sane during the election. And then I love Mike and Kelly. So she's a big reason why as well.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you.
I listen all the time.
Very grateful to you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah.
Come back regularly. Appreciate it. All right, Tom, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are after you unmute and what's on your mind today.
Hey, good morning. Harper's Ferry, Virginia.
All right.
You guys have got the best political show I've ever seen. As I've mentioned to my wife repeatedly, it's one of the few political shows I can watch and listen to people I don't agree with and not walk away mad. It's really, you really do a great job here. Just terrific.
Thank you, sir. Grateful to you, and love seeing the classic Rumors cover proudly displayed in your home.
It is a classic indeed.
Is that a piece of vinyl in there?
Yes, it is.
And do you have a turntable that you use?
Yes, I do.
You are my hero.
I'm vinyl junkie. Got lots of.
Awesome.
To the point. Tariffs. Let's not lose the plot here. You had one of the community members, Anthony Banks, I think it was, called in 2 weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
Talking about the devastation that occurred in North Carolina. All these small towns that went out of business when the mills closed. That story was writ large. You may have seen Secretary Bessent at the New York Economics Club make reference to a study called China Shock.
Yes, sir.
China Shock's an academic piece of work. It's not political. It basically said that millions of jobs were lost, that real incomes fell throughout the region, even after you accounted for lower consumer prices, that no jobs had come back after some 10 years, or the jobs that came back were pretty low paying, and that there was a terrific correlation between the counties that were most badly struck by trade and the opioid epidemic.
Yep.
This is bad stuff. A bomb went off when we let China into the WTO. Batcha's been on the show many times talking about these same things. I don't care about elite opinion. Elite opinion told us that China entering the WTO was a great idea. Elite opinion told us that deregulating the financial sector was a great idea. Give us 2008, So I think that the fundamental issue with all of this is to try to restructure the U.S. economy, do something about the wages and earnings of people in the bottom half of the income distribution. And nobody's done anything about that lately. Obama ignored it. Bush ignored it. It wasn't until Trump when the subject even came up. And I think this is a big deal. I'm hoping that these tariffs work out well. I'm not convinced that it's going to be it may rock the stock market a bit. But it's what, 10% of our imports are 10% of our spending is on imported products. It's not going to make that big a deal.
Tom, you're speaking for tens of millions, so thank you for that. If the president called you and said, "I loved what you said, give me some advice," what advice would you give him about implementation?
Hang tough. Do the reciprocity, and then look carefully at some of these other countries that have been taking exceptional advantage of the United States. I don't think we can keep doing this. I think, quite frankly, President Trump is president because of this. It has caused the hostility in our politics. That there's a group of people who've done right well. Probably most of us involved in this chat, the laptop class, whatever, seen nice rises in income over the last 20 years, and another group of people who have done not so good. And that's got to change. And if tariffs, I'm an economist, and I know the story you're supposed to tell about tariffs. Comparative advantage and inefficiencies and all that sort of stuff.
But for you, that's trumped by the need for some fundamental restructuring.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dan, question or comment for Tom?
Well, first off, Tom, I think you're spot on. You speak so well for so many. You may be an economist, but you're, I think, pretty good political analyst as well. I think one of the problems for the Democratic Party was that under the Obama administration, we said to people in Southern Ohio, the T of Pennsylvania, move to the city and get a better education, get a new job and clean energy, or kind of like, you need to move on. Whereas Trump said, no, I'm going to fight for the job that you had and bring it back so you can have, your way of life is good. And I embrace it. I respect it. And I'm going to fight for you. Right. And that is a huge problem for us now to try to undo. That's why I say I hope Trump is successful. If we can bring back working class jobs and people can have a good living and a good life and their kids can stay in those towns, etc., it's great. I think the question is to unwind the world economy, the way it's so intertwined, is not going to happen in 6 months to a year. It is going to take a serious amount of time. And the question is, what is the pain threshold to do this, and for how long? One of the problems we have, Dems have arguing for clean energy solutions, is it's going to cost a little bit more, right? But we're going to get to a better place. We won't be relying on oil, etc. And Americans say, I don't want to pay more for my gas to power my car. I don't want to pay more to heat my home. I don't want to pay more for air conditioning, right? So how much are Americans willing is the great question here.
Sean.
Let me just throw in one more quick point on the thing you just said. Whose jobs get hammered when we go to a Green New Deal?
Oh, I get it. I totally, I hear you.
Whose wages got crushed by, 20 million illegal immigrants?
Look,
all these things add up.
Yep, I hear you.
So, Tom, it's funny you say this. Like, yesterday, I was in a briefing that illustrated kind of exactly what you're talking about. And I'm going to use my very technical, but let me see which side we're on. This is 2003 U.S. manufacturing, China manufacturing. Right now, China's up here, we're down there. Our share of manufacturing in the world is now so small that China actually, when you look at the US, Japan, and Germany combined don't match China. We have lost our industrial base in this country. We make nothing here. And you go back and you start to look at what happened in England and all these places where you outsource stuff. You don't sustain. Between our debt and our lack of manufacturing base, we can get, it's unfortunate, but if people don't wake up at some point with the threat that we face from China, we're doomed. And I don't mean to be, sort of doom and gloom about this, but the reality is that we want to take on more debt. We want to attrit our manufacturing base, allow China to grow, and then go, gosh, I didn't see this coming. It's right in front of our face.
Well, I'm hoping he's successful. It's an approach I know economists tend not to favor, but it seems to me it's the only game in town. We've been talking about this for years. Retrain workers. Those retraining programs never produce anything. People are not malleable. They live where they live. They can't. When a whole community goes under, you can't sell your house. You can't move to another area. So I think this has been a major impetus in Trump's rise in the first place.
100%.
And I think if the Democrats jump on board this, it neutralizes that issue. Not that I'm looking forward to Democrats winning elections.
Yeah.
By the way.
Tom, what do you think the worst case is of this?
I don't know if there'll be a worst case.
You see no risk involved? You see no risk?
There's some risk involved, but say
talk about the worst case risk. If the president's absolutely country's response leads us to the worst place possible, what does that look like?
I don't think the worst case is very big. It's very much of a deal. I just do not see this as being this is the tail wagging the dog. This is a big country, big economy. We import, again, something like 10% of what we consume. You can have some price increases going through the system. It may hurt a couple of specific industries, but I just don't think this is going to be a big deal. I don't see the sky falling. I don't think this is, the end of the world in 2000.
All right, Tom, one more question for you. Do you watch the show Veep?
Do I watch what?
The show Veep?
No.
All right. Well, I think Gary Cole is on Veep. Take a look. You think that looks at all like you, or am I wrong?
A little bit.
All right.
It's a compliment, Tom. Take it.
Yeah.
He's better looking and younger. So what can I say?
All right. Thank you for joining. I hope you'll come back regularly. Very grateful.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you,
guys. Right. Thank you. Lisa, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
Hi. So I'm from Arizona, Northern Arizona, and I'm actually in Philadelphia now, so that's why I can actually look decent on screen. It's not 6 o'clock in the morning where I am. But I love this show. I think it's fantastic. I'm always happy to tune in on YouTube when I usually can. So I had a question about Ro Khanna. I've been seeing him everywhere. I mean, I actually first saw him on the first show I watched on Two Way with Mark, interviewing him in the evening. And he's everywhere. He was on Bill O'Reilly, even, I think. I think he might be trying to do a bid for president, or I don't know. He just came out of the woodworks, and I just wanted to hear what your opinions were about if he even has a shot, coming from really nobody I've ever heard of. And I'm a native Californian originally. I'm one of those ones that moved from California to Arizona because I couldn't stand what Gavin Newsom was doing to our state. So it's just, I just would love to hear your thoughts on his viability for that.
I'll go first. Look, there's a huge vacuum, and he is an interesting figure, right? He's a Bernie Sanders supporter from the past, but he's from Silicon Valley. He's very pro-economic growth. He believes, as Gavin Newsom does, that the party needs to listen to Trump voters. And he is impatient for making government work for the agenda he believes in, and doesn't think the party is necessarily headed in the right direction. And the reason he's everywhere is he wants to get his message out. And he does know that if he has aspirations to run for president, he's got to be better known. And so he's also a very talented guy, and so he has no problem going on these other platforms. And I think you'll continue to see him, and I think you'll see people like him who are hungry and eager and impatient for change, not just in the country but in the party, being very visible, because again, there's this big vacuum. Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is definitely willing to go everywhere, and because of that, the right invites him places. So he's on Fox and Friends, I think today. He's gone on a lot of, you mentioned O'Reilly's show, because I think that he is willing to have a conversation and not yell, which is kind of what some people want to do. I mean, so he's a very respectful and smart guest, and people like having him on. I've always believed. I mean, it's very hard for a House member to get the level of stature and attention to run. Is he running for something else? Meaning, does he want to be the VP or just? I don't know. I think he's got aspirations. I just can't. I'm not dialed in enough to know what they would be. But he sort of plays it right. I mean, he's very in tune with his base. He's very media savvy. And that's a nice little elixir.
And I'll just say before Dan weighs in, he's two things that not everybody in politics are. He's brilliant and he's really nice. And not everybody are those two things. Dan.
You guys both said it really well. I don't have much to add. I mean,
Okay.
we'll see where he goes.
All right, Lisa, thanks for joining. Grateful to you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go for a little alchemy of our own by bringing in at the same time Chris and Hugo, both Democrats. Gentlemen, welcome in. Chris is in Georgia, as regular viewers know, and we love hearing from Chris regularly. And Hugo will go first. Tell us, man, where you are, what's on your mind today, and then Chris will jump in too.
Hugo, calling from southeastern Connecticut, Mystic Pizza. I'm that guy. So I'm sensing a little bit of a disconnect. Tom was talking about how Republicans should be pushing for manufacturing jobs that pay livable wages, something that Democrats have been pushing for 40 years. When that happened via legislation in California, fast food workers are making $20 an hour now, but getting their hours cut. What's the difference between forcing employers to pay a livable wage and forcing countries to change their trade patterns so that we can have more manufacturing in the United States?
Yeah, good question. Chris, go ahead and weigh in on whatever you'd like, and then Sean and Dan will come back.
Boy, there's so many things I'd like to weigh in on, but I'll just choose a couple. I'm curious why some people on here how you would explain that in most Midwestern states, Trump got about 55% of the vote in general, but in the South, he got between 62 and 80. That's one point I'd like to make. I guess eggs were more expensive in the South. Don't think so, but let's park that one for a second. And secondly, I do think that the Democrats will come up with a palatable candidate who doesn't die on the stupid heels of men using women's bathrooms and some other of the extremities. But I don't think it'll be most of the people that you guys have been discussing. It's not going to be Cory Booker. He doesn't have the right gravitas feel. It won't be Pritzker because he doesn't look right. I mean, these things matter in politics. And it sure as heck won't be Kamala. We're not stupid enough to ride that train again. So I don't know who it'll be, but my vote would be on Shapiro probably. So I'll just stop there.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Sean, pick up on Hugo and Chris's points wherever you wish.
I just start with Hugo. I guess there, as I said, for me, just when it comes to the trade thing, I don't think this is a fairness issue, in terms of one country they're equating their tariff to what ours. I think if you go back and look at why our trade policy evolved the way it did, a lot of it was market access, trying to help people develop that for countries that are well past that stage. So I think one of the things that's forgotten is we allowed them to keep their tariff higher in an effort to help countries develop, evolve. And that time has passed. The idea that we're treating some of these countries like they're still in the developing world is insane. So I think there's a big difference between our domestic policy, which is built on a system of capitalism that allows employers to pay people. When people talk about living wages, I think there's a big difference between certain jobs what they do. And if you look at, again, the way states are addressing it, there are places I live in Northern Virginia. You look at the minimum wage in DC and Virginia and Maryland. Now there's massive competition for key workers because of what DC has done to its minimum wage, attracting people. We're having a harder time in Northern Virginia to fill a lot of hospitality jobs, a lot of restaurant workers. But that competition is actually good for the workforce. It's giving them better benefits. So I think there's two separate discussions: our trade policy, which is a matter of just pure fairness, and then the capitalistic system. Way more to go into on that. On Chris's point, we probably agree on a lot of what Chris just said, in terms of the candidates that are going to run. Although I find it fascinating because I agree with Chris's political assessment of the field, but yet poll after poll still shows that Kamala is by far the choice of, I mean, not by like 10%, but by like 40%, the choice of Democratic voters going into this. So I agree with Chris's assessment. I just wonder if she runs, if they'll follow through on that.
Dan.
Yeah, just quickly here in the interest of time. I think a lot of the jobs people are talking about coming back in manufacturing, frankly, are not minimum wage jobs. They are higher paying jobs. And I always go to two campaigns I worked on that were pretty, the members I worked for were anti-fracking. And one of the devastating arguments was fracking was a job that you could get at a high school in the oil fields and make $100,000 a year. And in what other industry could you do it? And when we said, no, it's going to harm the environment, Republicans said, it's going to be consumed in their good paying jobs. It was not a good place to be as a politician. To Chris, to your point, don't know who will emerge. Probably, not those three, but we will see. I still, I'm bullish the party will get its act together, figure out a message. We'll get messengers. And look, John Kerry, Al Gore, they all led those first few polls, it's just name ID. And then it people focus more, other candidates emerge.
Yeah. Hugo and Chris, thank you both for coming in. Grateful to you both.
I want to just one more quick point on manufacturing, that just for the record, this is going to be an interesting thing because manufacturing jobs have traditionally been really good for a lot of workers, to Dan's point, that came out of high school and college. Yep. AI is absolutely changing that game. And that's the thing, is there's a difference between maintaining an industrial base here in the United States for our own production, which isn't critical, and the jobs that will come for that. Because I think that's the one thing that no one's talking about is a lot of these are going to come back and be AI jobs, machine robot learning, etc.
Yeah. All I'll say, Sean, you referenced the employment in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area. All I'll say is, once again, cite, after my experience here for 2 days, President Kennedy's famous line about Washington: it's a city of northern charm and southern efficiency. That's all I have to say. All right, let's preview stuff that's coming up. Sean, what do you have on your program tonight at 6?
Tariffs, election breakdown, and we're going to talk with Josh Hammer about Trump's third term and a lot of other legal stuff.
All right, 3 other things to tell you about today. In moments, in about 6 minutes, I'll be on at Sirius XM with Michael Smerconish, as I am every Wednesday at 10 o'clock. So I'll see some of you there. 5 o'clock Eastern time today, Meghan McCain's Happy Hour. Authors of a new book, Fight: Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House, Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes. They've co-authored 3 books together now, I think, and they're both vibrant guests, and they'll run you through the scoops and narratives that they have in her book with Meghan at 5 p.m. If you haven't sampled Meghan's Happy Hour yet, I recommend you do today. It's going to be a good episode, and Meghan is our favorite. And then at 6 o'clock, I'll be on two-way tonight. We're going to talk about the tariffs. The president's event's supposed to start at 4 Eastern time in the Rose Garden. Let's take bets, guys. What time will the president begin to speak, and how long will the event go? Sean?
4:18, 37 minutes.
Dan?
4:30, and he can't stop talking until 5:30. He takes questions, and he's defensive, and he's brawling.
All right, that's the other question. Does he take questions?
He will take questions, I believe. I'm going to go for broke. I was originally going to go cover it in the Rose Garden, but I got to get back to New York. So I'll be watching and waiting for my 6 o'clock deadline. I think they'll delay it an hour. It'll start at 5, and he'll go into two-way tonight, and I'll be carrying his thing live. We'll see.
He'll go into darkness.
See, but we'll have full coverage at 6 o'clock on the tariffs and the day's political news with a bunch of guests, some of whom I know but won't tell you now, and some of whom we're still booking because we're looking for the best people available. We're like an NBA team. We just draft the best athlete available. Grateful to everybody for joining. Thank you for all who raised your hands, including some new folks who we didn't get to. I hope you'll come back tomorrow and raise your hand, and some new folks we did get to. Very grateful to you for being part of the two-way community. Sean, Dan, and I will be back in 23 hours for another edition of the morning meeting. Have a great day, everybody.